Hello and welcome to episode number 191. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, once again recorded in the beautiful Baroque town of Solothurn in Switzerland. Nice to have you with us. So far in our Project Management Podcast's Project Leadership series, we have first heard Rick Verlerga and Thomas Yuli, who are both authors on project leadership, and they discussed their leadership models on expectation management and leadership principles. Then we spoke with Andy Kaufman, and we learned how to develop our own leadership skills and those of our teams, including the appropriate worksheets for our premium listeners. Now, it's time for some hands-on project leadership tools. Enter Suzanne Matson and learn about adaptive project leadership. This episode is sponsored by the PDU Podcast, which is our sister podcast. It's a convenient way for PMPs to earn unlimited Category A PDUs. It works just like the podcast you're listening to right now. You subscribe once and you'll automatically receive new video episodes to watch every month. Earning your PDUs is now on autopilot. Visit pducast.com. That's pducast.com. Adaptive Project Leadership is a project leadership tool that will help you identify the appropriate leadership style for your project team members. Just like every project is unique, so are your team members, and your leadership style has to follow suit. As a special bonus item, Suzanne is making her Adaptive Project Leadership white paper and worksheet available to all our listeners. We're discussing the matrix from this paper in the interview, so you may want to take a look at the filled-in matrix on page 3 first. You can manually download the worksheet from pm-podcast.com in episode number 191. However, if you use iTunes, Google Reader, or any kind of software to subscribe to and download our podcasts, then you will very likely already see this file on your computer. Suzanne Matson is a project and program manager, mentor and coach with over 15 years' experience in managing and rolling out large change programs for the financial sector. She is a qualified corporate and executive coach and Prince 2 practitioner. She is currently employed as a program director for one of the world's largest financial institutions. As part of her job, she coaches and mentors project managers, and her book, The Project Management Coach, will be published in December by Management Concepts. And now, please adjust your listening style and enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview. Today with Suzanne Matson, project and program manager, mentor and coach.
Hello, Suzanne. Welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
Thank you very much, Cornelius. It is an honor and a privilege to be a guest on your program.
So, this is the Project Management Podcast's leadership series. Why do you speak and write on the topic of project leadership? What is your driving force?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you. To my mind, project leadership is really, you could say, the difference that makes a difference. Because you can be a good project manager by managing tasks and budgets and plans and resources. But to be a great project manager, you really have to be a project leader. And I suppose that should be the goal for most project managers, to be really good at what they do. And also, it's a very special thing, really, to be a project leader. It's something quite different because the project manager starts to apply their own uniqueness. So as a project manager, you often operate within certain boundaries that are set for you. But as a project leader, you really go beyond that and start defining your own sets of boundaries, and you become more authentic. And I suppose that's why project leaders are often more in their flow, and they can have a magnetic personality, they can be very confident. So really, that's why it's so fascinating to me. And it's also worth mentioning that project leaders really, it's not just about the person, it's not just about the project manager or the project leader. Everybody around them will benefit because they're in their flow, because they apply themselves. It's a benefit to the team, it's a benefit to the customer. So yeah, it's a win-win situation, really.
As part of this series, I reach out to a diverse group of people to bring them on the program and talk about project leadership, but I have the hardest time finding women who talk about this topic. Why do you think that is? Why is this just a man's domain, project leadership? I couldn't see why.
No, I mean, you're making me think there whether there is a deeper reason here of it may be that women are less open about sharing their experiences on leadership, or it may be that women are less likely to label what they do as project leadership. But I have really, in my personal experience, I have no evidence that suggests that. So in the 15 years I've been involved in project management and program management, I can just say that I've seen altogether fewer female project managers. So I suppose from my point of view, if there are fewer female project managers, there would be fewer female project leaders.
Right, or fewer speakers who are female who speak on project leadership. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, on then to our main topic of the interview, which is adaptive project leadership. Can you give us a short description of what that means?
Sure. So adaptive project leadership, I would say, is an aspect of project leadership. It's the aspect which is concerned with how the project manager interacts with the individual team members. So how do they manage people, or how do they lead, coach, or supervise people? Anything to do with that interaction. So at the simplest level, we could say that adaptive project leadership is about the project manager changing their style of leadership according to who they're interfacing with. That means that everybody shouldn't be managed or led in the same way. And that's not the same as treating people differently. Let me just point that out. As project managers, we should treat everybody the same in terms of the underlying values. So we should show respect to everybody, honesty, integrity. That absolutely remains the same. But the way we manage and lead people should vary according to people's needs.
The term itself, adaptive leadership, adaptive project leadership, is this a term that you have come up with, or who came up with this first?
Yeah, it's my own term.
Okay.
Yeah, it's my own term, but of course the underlying principles are based on, I would say, good personal leadership practice and general leadership, people management skills in the market.
Okay, so let me ask the obvious follow-up question to what you have just said a moment ago. Why? Why should I have to adapt my leadership style to the people whom I lead?
Well, because to be really effective at what we do as project managers, we have to be good at leading people. So project management is this typical, you have task management on one side and the people leadership element on the other. And we absolutely need to embrace that people leadership side. When you're good at leading people, it really means that people feel good about themselves, they're motivated, and they want to contribute to the project. And that way, everybody benefits. And the way that we go about managing people well and motivating people is by playing to their individual strengths, if you like. We need to grow people, and we need to give them what they need, and we need to convey that in a way that they understand. And that's why we need to adapt our approach. And again, let me mention, it's not so much about the project manager here, it's really about the person we're managing. We need to start asking ourselves, how can I best serve the person within my team? And that means adapting my approach to where they are, really.
And where do I begin my adaptation? What's the first thing to think about?
So the first thing is really to start observing people. And I mean, again, some people do this naturally. Yeah, so no issue. To many people, it comes naturally. But again, there are many project managers out there who are very, very task-oriented. So for them, the first thing is really to start observing people much more and become aware of people's individual needs. And when we look at people's needs, there are really two overarching things that we should be looking at. One is, how skilled are people in terms of their experience level and in terms of their competence level within the task or situation they're in? And the second one we should look at as project managers is, how driven and motivated is the individual, or how confident are you? So these two things combined really start giving us a picture of what their needs are and how we can adapt our approach to them.
What are some of the skills that I need as a project manager? in order to become an adaptive project leader?
So probably the most important skill here is the listening skill. So listen to people. And when I say listen, I don't necessarily just mean listen with our ears. I mean actually listening with our entire body. And that means focusing on the other person with a view to really understanding them. What are their strengths? What are their development points? Also, which areas do they excel in which situations are they highly motivated, and where are they not? So really starting to tune in to the other person. Because as project managers, we really have that responsibility to grow others. Again, we shouldn't just see people as, oh, it's a resource on my project, he's there so that I can tick off a task against my Gantt chart. So the project manager really needs that desire to want to motivate and grow others, and the willingness to focus on the team members.
And how can I learn all of this? I mean, it sounds like these are soft skills and you can't just go into a classroom and sit down and somebody tells you how to do it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. They're kind of soft skills, life skills, people management skills, and they come with, I suppose, experience for managing people. But there are some things we can do over and above to actually acquire some of these skills. And one thing I would mention is working with a mentor can be very, very powerful. And again, it should be working with a mentor, someone or a coach, someone who we admire, look up to, someone who has some of maybe what we want, and make it very clear to the mentor what we're trying to get out of the relationship. And another thing which is very related to mentoring is observing role models. So there are people out there, and we know who they are when we think about it. They're really good with people. They're good at motivating people. And they're good at adapting their own approaches. So observe them. What is it that they do right? And maybe model what they do.
All right. In the article or white paper that you wrote on adaptive leadership, on adaptive project leadership, you also discussed the 4 basic leadership styles. Now, I'd appreciate it if we could go through these 4 styles here, and you could give us an example of when to use which of these 4 styles, because I think it's important that we as project leader understand what styles there are and when we use them in order to adapt our leadership style accordingly. And just as an overview, they are instruct, nurture, encourage, and self-govern. So let's begin with instruct.
Yes, of course. So instruct, as you say, is really the first adaptive leadership style that I have in this model, if you like. It's a style we use when people are not so experienced in what they do. Let's say they're new in a job, they are not terribly competent yet. So as a project manager, we need to give them instruction and guidance and direction, because otherwise they don't know how to do things. As an example, we may think of a person, let's say a person called Joe, who is works as a project support within our project. And let's say she's new in the job. She is very motivated. I mean, she's new after all. She wants to make this work, but she doesn't know how to do things. So we would say that her skill level in this particular instance is very low. And as a project manager, we need to tell her how to do things. If we just tell her, send out a project report tomorrow, she won't know how to do it. She won't know what goes in the report, who to send it to. So in that situation, which may sound obvious now I'm mentioning it, but in the situation it may not always be so obvious, that we need to really tell her how to do things. So that's the first style, instruct, to be used with people who are not so experienced in what they do, but who are motivated, so they don't really need a lot of emotional support from us.
Right, and it could also be a very experienced person, but who is currently starting on a new job where they are not so experienced, and you would need to instruct them there, whereas as in another position, you wouldn't have to, right?
That's absolutely right. So it totally depends on the skill at hand. So you could have one person who is a project administrator and absolutely fabulous at doing that job, and you use one style. But let's say that person now wants to go off and do a BA work, a BA role as a business analyst, has never done it before, and is not confident at all in that area. You would, as a manager, need to use a different style.
All right. The second style on your list is nurture.
Yes. So the nurturing style, as the word suggests, is really a style where we give a lot of emotional support to the person. And we would do that in a situation where someone is not very motivated. In fact, they may be quite disillusioned, they may be lacking confidence. For whatever the reasons are, they are certainly demotivated. And at the same time, they also are not very skilled or experienced within the particular task at hand within that situation. So we need to nurture them. We need to give them lots of support and direction, really listen to them, give them attention, because the view is, of course, the goal is that we need to increase their motivation levels and their skill level. So that's the nurture style.
Right. Now, I suppose following right after that is encourage, right?
Yes. And encourage is similar in that we still need to give the person who we're interfacing with a lot of emotional support, because again, when we use this style, it's with people who are lacking confidence or who are not motivated. But in contrast to Joe before, who we said was a project support person, this person here, who we could call Alice, let's say she's done project support for a number of years. She knows exactly how to do it. But let's say she's demotivated for whatever reasons. That's where we would use the encourage style. So totally opposite of the instruct, you would say.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, the last one you have is self-govern. Seems almost like that's the top of Maslow's pyramid. Seems like we're right up there now. Self-fulfillment, isn't that it?
Well, I don't know if it's self-fulfillment, but certainly there must be an aspect of it, since with this style, people are not only very skilled, they're also very motivated. And if you are very motivated and driven in your job, yes, it does mean that you find purpose and meaning in it. So I suppose from that sense, you're right. And for a project manager, if we really think about the goal is for everybody within your team should be to some extent, they should be motivated about what they do and they should be skilled at what they do. Of course, when people move to a new role, as you pointed out, there would be a period of transition. That means that the goal becomes for people for you as a project manager to use a self-governing style with them. It means that you should interfere with them to a minimum degree, I would say. Because if people are motivated, they don't need your emotional support. And if people are highly skilled, they don't need to be told what to do. So what the project manager should not do in this instance is to micromanage them. That would kind of do a lot of harm.
Right. So instructive leadership style used on somebody who's actually very motivated, who knows what they're doing, that becomes micromanagement. But using the instructive leadership style on somebody who needs it, that is appropriate leadership, right?
That's right. And there are so many articles going around about don't micromanage, don't do this or that. But really, we can't cut everybody across the same whatever. We have to adapt it. And sometimes micromanagement may be very appropriate.
All right, so in review, the 4 leadership styles, for those of you taking notes here, are instruct, nurture, encourage, and self-govern. Okay, so I have these 4 leadership styles. Now, do you have any suggestions for me in regards to how can I figure out who on my team needs which approach?
Yes, so there are a number of things that we can do here, really. And of course, we need to ask ourselves for each of the team members, well, in each instance here, because again, team members may play different roles. For each role that they have within a project, how skilled are they, i.e. how experienced and competent are they, versus how motivated and confident are they? And for those people who are very visual, it's always nice to put things down on paper. So I have devised this kind of matrix where we can try to put people into the matrix. Although it is a model, it kind of does the trick initially. So for those of the listeners who have a piece of paper in front of them, I suggest that they actually try to draw out this matrix. So we have a vertical axis. Sorry, let's start with the horizontal one. On the horizontal axis, we would then measure how skilled and experienced and competent the individual would be. And on the vertical axis, we would measure how motivated and confident and committed the person is. And that means that we really end up with we can draw a matrix there with 4 quadrants, where if I just go through the quadrants one by one to make sure people have drawn it right. On the upper left-hand quadrant, we would then have people who are very motivated, but have a low skill level. And that corresponds to the instruct style, as we talked about first. In the second quadrant, which is the one to the lower left-hand side, we would have people who are not very motivated. They're low on the motivation axis, and they are low on the experience axis as well, which is where the nurture style comes in. In the third quadrant, in the lower right-hand side, we would have people who are very skilled, but don't have a lot of motivation. That's where we use the encourage style. And the last quadrant, the fourth quadrant, is the self-govern style, which is to the upper right-hand side of the matrix. And that's where people have both a lot of motivation and drive, and they have a lot of competence. So now that people have drawn out this matrix, what's interesting is to think of a team member they have and look at, let's say, 1 or 2 roles, major roles that team member plays, and say within each of those roles, how competent is my team member and how confident is my team member? So map them out according to both axes and place them within the matrix and see if your style more or less matches, if your leadership style more or less matches what it should in order to meet this person's needs.
Mm. It's oftentimes difficult to put a label on people that, if it fits exactly into this box. What if I have trouble putting people into a box and say, well, I actually, when it comes to these 4 quadrants, Joe needs to go in 3 of these quadrants. What now?
Well, to be honest, that could be a very healthy sign, because it probably means that Joe, in this case, would have 3 different roles, or there would be different situations. That's why you would have difficulties placing her. So if you want to place her in 3 different parts of the matrix, you should place her in 3 different parts, because it may be that as a project administrator, for instance, she needs the nurture style, but in other areas where she plays a different role with the team, she comes across totally different to you. And it is because she is different in that instance. So by all means, it's a healthy sign, because people have different sides to them, and we should reflect those different sides according to their different roles within this matrix, if that makes sense.
Does make sense, yeah. There's another danger that I can see, and that is if somebody fits into a box, right? You have a team member who fits into the instruct box perfectly. All right, you've just put a label on this person, and after 1.5 years on the project, well, this person to you, because you once put them in the instruct box, still on the instruct box. Don't we run the danger of labeling people here?
Yes, and I would say potentially with any model you have that risk. A model should be taken for what it is. It's a model, it is not reality. So the way I would encourage people to use this particular adaptive leadership model is to raise their awareness about how they might be interacting with a person, how they might want to adapt their style to different people. But you're absolutely right. To place a person within one quadrant and say, oops, that person needs a lot of support and that's never going to change. I mean, that's obviously not the purpose. So we need to update our maps of the world very frequently and be aware of not boxing people. Absolutely.
All right. And this matrix can also be found in the adaptive leadership style PDF that we are going to be including along with this podcast for our listener. Something completely different here. Suzanne, you have a book coming out towards the end of the year. What's it going to be about? And are we going to invite you back on the program to talk about it?
Well, hopefully you are. Yes, that's right. The book should be out in December, fingers crossed. It is called The Project Management Coach, and it is a practical workbook for project managers who want to transition into becoming project leaders. And it can be used either as a self-coach framework for the individual project manager, or it can be used by line managers who want to coach others to become excellent project leaders.
All right, I'm already looking forward to having you back. To close out this interview, let's end with some advice here. What are your top 3 adaptive project leadership tips for our listeners? Tips that they can hopefully use tomorrow on their projects with their teams.
Yes, so of course they touch upon things we have already mentioned, such as, I would say, number 1, listen. There is a reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should listen twice as much as we speak. Not that I have proven that, for the last 30 minutes, of course. But generally, listen to people, listen to the people on your team, spend time with your team members. That's the only way you can really find out what they're all about and how you can best tap into their potential and adapt your style to motivate them the best possible way. And the second one, again, ties in with what we have spoken about. Use the matrix. Use this matrix to place people in, knowing that it's a model. Use it to raise your awareness. And when you have placed people in the matrix, whether you have them entered there several times or not, then talk to people about it. So sit down with a team member and say, I get the sense that in this and this situation, you're just really motivated to doing this thing. And you know what you're doing, and that means that I don't guide you very much. Are you okay with that? Is that a correct interpretation? Because if we don't play this back to people, they may not understand why you used to spend a lot of time with them as a project manager, and now you don't, and they may actually think that is odd, or they may feel that you're avoiding them. So that's tip number 2, is really, use the matrix, but also play it back to people, so that make sure that you're on the same page here. And the third tip is a little bit different. I would encourage people to, on their way into work tomorrow, to imagine that everybody on their project were a volunteer, and just see what that does. Because if every team member on your project is a volunteer, it means that they are there because they want to be there. Let's imagine they're not being paid for it. So you as a project manager really need to tap into their resources and make sure that they are motivated enough to come back the following day. And that kind of turns things around a bit. It means that we're not just expecting people to come and do their job because they're being paid for it. No, as a project manager, we need to make sure that there's something in it for each individual. And I find that a fascinating thought. I don't know what your initial reaction is.
Oh, no, it's absolutely fantastic tip. I have never heard this tip before. And I have to tell you that this is going to change people's view and perception of their project teams if they really do that. It changes your style instantly, because you suddenly begin thinking of people differently, you begin treating them differently, and it can only benefit the project that you're working on.
Yeah, no, it's a very powerful mind game, really. Very powerful.
Yes. All right, Suzanne, thank you so much for having been on the program today, and thank you for these great final tips. Appreciated.
Thank you.
And that was Suzanne Mattsson on adaptive project leadership. There's a bit more of her that you can hear at the very, very end of this podcast, so keep on listening. Please don't forget that the white paper and worksheet we discussed in the interview is available for you as a free download with episode 191 from the website. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. If you are a PMP or a PGMP and you're looking for a simple and effective way to earn your PDUs, then try our sister podcast, the PDU Podcast. Get new webinars and at least one new PDU every month on autopilot. Stop by at pducast.com. That's pducast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this saying about your project stakeholders: if you can't beat them, present them. Until next time. Suzanne, if you had the opportunity to do one of your projects all over again, what is the project and what would you do differently?
Right. So I suppose as most project managers, we're a little bit perfectionistic, aren't we? And I suppose we would all say, oh, I want to do, if I could do them all again, I would change so much. But there is one project that stands out for me. It was a very, very large, very complex, particularly complex project where we were running, it was all regulatory work within the financial sector. And what happened for me was that I didn't actually understand the domain very well. I didn't understand the financial product we were working with, and I didn't understand the regulatory requirements. And I was handed this project over by my boss at the time, who got promoted. So it was literally from one day to the other, and I was out of my depth, to say the least. And we got through it, and I remained the project manager on that project for years, actually, and eventually got there. But what I would change today is that I would spend a lot more of my time up front, really understanding the business drivers, the business domain, and really understanding the end game. I got there in the end after years of having worked with this complex area. But, in the beginning, I was out of my depth, and it was very uncomfortable. And I would have added so much more benefit to the project and reduced my stress levels if I had taken the time up front to really understand what we were doing, what the vision was, and what the business domain was. So definitely, I would change that again if I had to do it again.